Adam, an interesting team, Minnesota 2-0. They kind of escaped a matchup with Nebraska in their first game. Honestly, I think Nebraska probably should have won the game. The Cornhuskers threw an interception in the end zone right at the end of the first half. So points taken off the board there. They had actually, I think they had either scored or gotten very close to scoring on a sneak play, but there was a false start. This is just a brutal one. It's like 2nd and goal from the 1. They all hustle up there, sneak it. I think they scored, but a false start didn't count. Throw a pick on the next play. Then, even with that, Nebraska led 10-3 and had the ball with less than, I'll say, 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And Jeff Sims, the Georgia Tech transfer, who, bless his heart, has had a tough start to the year with turnovers, fumbles the ball. Minnesota gets it, scores a touchdown on a great play. You probably saw that play. That was Daniel Jackson who made a 4th down toe drag catch that was one of the better catches in college football so far this season. That ties the game. So bad news if you're the Cornhuskers. Then they move to about midfield. They're moving. Throw a pick. Minnesota kicks a game-winning field goal, wins it 13-10. So 2 turnovers by Nebraska in the final couple minutes, plus a key turnover in the end zone earlier in the game. So a game that I'm guessing Nebraska felt like it should have won. Minnesota was happy to get out of there, didn't play its best, but got the win. Then they played Eastern Michigan, a team that, as you would expect, Minnesota is a little more talented than. And it wasn't a dominant victory, but 25-6 was the final score. There was a safety in there on a blocked punt that aided in the weird score. Couple things about this game. Number one, Minnesota's defense was lights out, and that is the strength of their team, Adam. They are really, really good on the defensive side. I think it will by far be the best defense that Carolina's seen this year to this point. I think in total it's probably the best team that Carolina's seen so far, but I'm sure it's the best defense they've seen so far. Their secondary is legit. Their corners, Justin Wally, really good. And then they have an Elon transfer, Trayvon Jones, who's had a good year as well. Those two so far have broken up a combined 3 passes, have forced a fumble, and have an interception between their 2 starters at corner. And then their 2 safeties are really good, particularly Tyler Nubin, who's a fifth-year senior at one of the safety spots. They're just really, really good in the secondary. They're hard to throw on. They cut on the ball well. They cover well. This will be a challenge for the Tar Heels to be able to throw the ball, in my opinion, consistently. Of course, but having said that, this is also the best quarterback and the best offense that Minnesota has faced. So it goes both ways. But so their defense lights out really all year. They've allowed 16 total points in 2 games. I don't care who you're playing. That's hard to do. But particularly last week, it was really, really good. Second half, I think Eastern Michigan finished. Now, the punt block helped in this, but they finished with negative yards in the second half. So, again, I don't care who you're playing. That's impressive. Now, having said all of that, the weird part about Minnesota, Adam, is I don't know what they want to do offensively. The first game against Nebraska, they threw it 44 times. The game against Eastern Michigan, they ran it 56 times. So they've been to these wild extremes in the 2 games as far as how they approach the game. And PJ Fleck, dynamic public speaker, their head coach, he talked about some in the press conference after the Eastern Michigan game that basically they were just going to run it until they just couldn't run it anymore. That they just decided that's what they were going to do. So I don't know how Minnesota will try to attack Carolina offensively because there hasn't been a real clear pattern yet. I think they've got some good backs. Sean Tyler is a Western Michigan transfer, and then Darius Taylor rushed for 193 yards. Now, he had 33 carries, so he had the ball a bunch. I think that's 7 more than Omarion Hampton got against App. So Darius Taylor, a freshman, named the Big Ten Freshman of the Week after that big performance last week. Those are the two main ball carriers. Bryce Williams, another veteran player, has been a little banged up. Their best wide receiver has been hurt. I don't think he's played yet, Chris Ottman-Bell. So that would obviously help their offense some too if he is available. He's got 125 catches in his career. Their number one linebacker hasn't played yet this year. His last name's Lindenberg. He hasn't played due to injury. He allegedly is getting close to being ready to play. Don't know if it will be against the Tar Heels or not. So, Adam, there's some mystery surrounding this team as far as personnel available, what they're going to do. But the one thing I can confidently say is that it is a really good defensive team that will challenge Carolina's offense.
And I don't think they're going to beat themselves. I think that's their other thing. They've gotten a lot of turnovers already this year defensively. They've gotten a lot of interceptions with that secondary that Jones talked about. They were third in the country in time of possession last year, and the two teams ahead of them were service academies, if that gives you any sense of how much they're holding on to the ball. So they think they might have found something with Darius Taylor against Eastern Michigan after he basically did zero in the first game because they asked him to do zero.
Yeah, he had one carry in the first game.
And then 33 in the second game.
Yeah.
So that is a bit of a changed workload, but You've got the two backs in this game who had the most rushing yards in the country last week in Hampton and Taylor.
Look at you and your preparation, Adam.
Yeah, sometimes I study. So a good matchup on the ground. I do think Carolina's quarterback is better. Now, I respect the Greek rifle, Jones.
Yeah. Ethan Kaliakmanis is the name of the Minnesota quarterback, a redshirt sophomore. Got a big, strong arm, and he's pretty athletic, dude. I mean, 6'4", 215, so he's a bigger guy, and he can run. He's been inconsistent, but he's flashed some real potential at that spot.
That always makes me nervous.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a Tar Heel football fan, that makes you nervous. You don't like hearing about these guys who flash potential because it tends to turn into productivity against the Tar Heels. But I think overall, if you have your choice of Greek rifle or Huntersville rifle, you take the Huntersville rifle. So I think the Tar Heels have the edge in that area. I think both teams would say, and we know Mac Brown would say, if they can run the ball better than Minnesota, they feel really good about their chances. I think Minnesota would say if they can run the ball better in Carolina, they feel good about their chances.
Yeah, Adam mentioned the turnovers. Already 5 turnovers, 4 of them interceptions by Minnesota in the first 2 weeks that they've played. The time of possession, Minnesota is 9th in the country. Again, short or small sample size, but 9th in the country so far this year. They're averaging better than 35 minutes of possession time so far this season. And so PJ Fleck, the head coach, likes to say the ball – what is it? The ball is
the program.
The ball is the program. Thank you. I was going to say the ball is the game, but I knew that wasn't right.
That too.
The ball is the program. So they put a lot of emphasis. And I do think that's a little bit why Darius Taylor played so much against Eastern Michigan is the other guy, Sean Tyler. So Taylor and Tyler. Taylor wears 1, Tyler wears 2.
And Tippecanoe.
So Tyler fumbled a couple times against Eastern Michigan early. They both went out of bounds, but then he fumbled later in the game and lost a fumble.
Yeah, don't fumble the program.
Ball's the program.
Don't fumble the program.
So don't know who we'll see. We'll see both of them against the Tar Heels, but I don't know which one will get a heavier workload. I'm not sure they know which one will get a heavier workload at this point. Adam, from the Tar Heel perspective, I think – well, hold on. One more thing about Minnesota before we get to that. They're big. Like here, this is their – now, per OurLads.com, the 2 deep. That, as far as I'm concerned, is 100% accurate.
Right.
Starting offensive line. 6'6", 325, 6'5", 315, 6'5", 300, 6'7", 335, 6'7", 315. That's a massive offensive line. And then the backups, 6'6", 315, 6'4", 305, 6'5", 310, 6'6", 315, 6'8", 315. This is a huge, huge line for Minnesota. And then you go to the defensive front, and not as big, but certainly not small. 6'4", 285, 6'2", 305, 6'6", 305, 6'5", 255. Those are just the four that I have listed as the starters. So, really big team up front. Feels like a Big Ten team. So, how the Tar Heels manage, particularly against that offensive line. Can they get because as we talked about, they still got pressure against Appalachian State. They had 9 quarterback pressures in the game, but 0 sacks. That's a high number of pressures with 0 sacks. So Carolina's been able to be disruptive, even though it was not as successful in week 2 compared to week 1. Can they still do that against a really big and older offensive line? I mean, you're looking at 4th-year junior, 5th-year senior, graduate student, 4th-year junior, 5th-year senior across that offensive line. So big and old.
This feels like a good team to play before playing Pitt because they feel Pittish.
Well, I think Mac Brown has said App, Minnesota, and Pitt, to varying degrees, of course, but are all similar teams with how they want to play, the style in which they are going to attack the Tar Heels. I mean, it is natural to assume that Minnesota will have bigger guys than Appalachian State. But I think the course of how they approach things will likely be similar. Of course, I say that, and they threw it 44 times in the first game, so who knows? But they are a big physical team up front.
And well coached.
And well coached.
And it seems like Mac Brown really likes P.J. Fleck.
Yep. P.J. Fleck made one key mistake this week, Adam. He accidentally called Miss Sally Miss Shelley.
Oh, yeah.
During his press conference on Monday.
You're off the list, P.J. Fleck.
I mean, look, I guess an understandable slip-up of the tongue.
No.
I'm going to assume P.J. Fleck's got a lot of things going through his mind as a football coach in the middle of the season.
Not more important than that.
But that's a fumble.
He didn't call him Mike Brown, did he?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's a fumble.
Yeah.
So
Coach Brown's going to go out there to midfield before the game. Like, DJ, great to see you.
This one's for Miss Sally. So good football team and a great test for Carolina. The last non-conference FBS opponent for the Tar Heels this year, because they still play Campbell, but that's later in the season, and they're not FBS. So I think, Adam, and we'll talk more about this next week, I think Carolina's gotten a really good variety of opponent in these first 3 weeks. You've got South Carolina, SEC, with an elite quarterback. You've got App State, who's going to be the try super hard, come at you full speed the entire time. And now you're at the kind of bigger, more physical team out of the Big Ten. You've certainly seen a lot of different things. In theory, that helps you as you move through ACC play. Of course, it's up to the Tar Heels to make that stuff pay off. But I do think they will at least be well-versed in some different styles.
And I think although we're still finding out what this Carolina team is, by 7 or 8 p.m. on Saturday, I think we'll know a lot about what this Carolina team is.
Adam, anything else in your mind, Carolina and Minnesota? The latest that we heard from the Tar Heels were British Brooks, Jonathan Dorno, and Ed Montelis, 3 players who didn't play against Appalachian State, that they would return to practice, so that's good news. Coaches talked a little bit about Stick Lane, the transfer from Georgia State, who Tar Heels were hoping could help them in the secondary. He's been banged up, but they think he's getting closer to being available and ready to play, which would be beneficial. So Tar Heels hopefully a little bit healthier, because it did feel like they were kind of sneakily a little banged up against Appalachian. I'm not saying that as some kind of excuse or anything like that. They just had some guys that weren't there. So, and I do think, Adam, the whole Tez Walker situation, while our thoughts and Carolina's thoughts are well documented, I do think at least now the Tar Heels know what they're working with. And so now you try to adjust to the personnel that you know you have available to be as good as you can be with those guys.
Nate McCollum?
Yeah, so he played, I think it was 8 snaps or something in the game against Appalachian, had 1 catch. the Carolina coaches basically said that they just weren't quite sure how much to use him and how much he'd be ready for. It wasn't a question of the health aspect of it. It was more they kind of found out late in the week that he'd be cleared, and they weren't quite sure about how much to use him in that game. I think he will be fully available in this game. How impactful he is, we'll have to wait and see. But I do think we've said this before. 60 catches last year at Georgia Tech, 5th leading receiver in the ACC, and he did not have the quality of quarterback that he's going to have throwing to him here at Carolina. So certainly somebody you'd rather have than not have if you're the Tar Heels. How much he'll be involved, don't know. How it changes things, don't know. We'll start learning that information. But good to have him available. And I think you got to get Copenhaver back healthy, too. I would assume that's not this week as far as him being able to play again without the wrap on his hand. Does he play with the wrap? Do they keep him out? Don't know that answer right now. But another guy that I think would benefit that Tar Heel offense to have him available. So 3:30, Kenan Stadium. We'll be on the air at 2:30 for the full network for Carolina and Minnesota.